I'm not in the camp of thinking AI is going to replace every single thing we do, but I am surprised more often than not at the things that I know that it can completely replace.
Welcome to Sound Bites. My name is Bill Binch, and I'm an operating partner at Battery Ventures. This is our podcast for all things go-to-market related, and I am super excited with our guest today. We are joined by Benjamin Pitman, the Chief Revenue Officer of Cube Software. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Bill. Super excited and kind of honored to be even on the podcast. Being that I've been listening to the last couple episodes and the guests are quite impressive, so hopefully I don't disappoint everyone. I have some big shoes to fill. So
there's a specific reason, Benjamin, that you're on today's show. And let me tee that up. So today we're going to talk about actionable AI. We have all been working with legacy vendors forever, and most of the legacy vendors are working diligently to AIify their applications. We've also been experimenting with some of the newer native AI apps that have launched in the last 24, 36 months. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about getting hands-on with AI tools like Lovable, like Claude, like ChatGPT, that any revenue leader can put to work. So in setting the stage for today, last August, Battery hosted a CRO summit where we had about 125 CROs come in and talk about what they were building. And it was a really, really cool moment because CROs were not just talking about buying packaged software. They were talking about building things, building agents, about building integrations, about building workflows, even going as far as building applications. And what's crazy is here we are 7 months later, and it seems like I see 10 plus postings a day on LinkedIn of some kind of new workflow or app that is magnitudes further ahead than what we did just 7 months ago. So in that setup, Ben, you've been a pretty early adopter of AI and are experimenting with a number of tools and many use cases. Before we dive into those tools and scenarios, I'm curious, when did you recognize a leaping off point, a turning point from those off-the-shelf AI tools?
yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I still remember like where I was sitting when I first saw on Twitter, now called X, the release of ChatGPT, and I went in and asked it its first question and it responded. And like I instantly knew in that moment things would be different forever. Like I just kind of figured it out. And in the beginning, I was using it for like, very basic use cases. Help me rewrite this email, help me write this positioning deck, just the actual copy itself. And those were kind of like the simplistic things that I saw. But I've known it from day one. It's just that now, like, I am more hyper vigilant on the fact that like once a week, the world changes. Our head of engineering said this recently. He was like, the world changes weekly. I think it might be the world changes daily. The jumping off point, which I think we'll get into a little bit later, is kind of the first realization that like, hey, this really is replacing some positions like, or some kind of roles in the company where I would have needed to rely on a graphic designer or needed to rely on a content marketer, a product marketer, to the point where I can now do these things myself. I'm not an IC and I haven't been for a long time, but when you and I sat down for coffee, I said to you, like, man, people that are ICs have no idea how good they have it. And so the real jumping off point came like about a month and a half ago, where I was able to accomplish something that I otherwise would have needed product and marketing to accomplish. And so from that day forward, like things have just been really different for me.
It's amazing how fast it is happening right now. The other thing that's notable about what you just shared there is you go back to when you first did your first ChatGPT, which was the end of 22, 23,
Yeah.
early 23. And now you're talking about maybe roles that are being replaced. And that is something I do want to get into because I want to talk about the measurement of the impact, because this is the thing I've observed, you've probably seen it too, Benjamin, is that last year there was a lot of experimentation, and experimentation was moving towards actually operationalizing things. But every time I talked to any type of leader and said, well, how are you measuring the impact of using that? It was still a little bit opaque.
It's super interesting, right? Because again, in the beginning, I think this was more about efficiency gains, right? Like this is something super interesting that I've thought about recently, and I think I'm kind of hitting the nail on the head here. So in the beginning, when ChatGPT first came out, it was like, how do I do things faster, right? How do I get a faster follow-up email out? How do I fact check something I'm going to send over to a prospect?
Right.
How can I prepare for a meeting in a faster way? But like That's a lot like I think let's talk about like when cell phones were first starting to change. Like there was a group of people at Research in Motion and like Nokia and all these companies doing their best to try to figure out how do we build a better keyboard, right? Like what's the way to build a keyboard and what's the next generation of phones going to look like? Can it be softer? Can it be more responsive? Meanwhile, these people in California were saying we're going to get rid of the keyboard and it's going to change everything forever. And so what I think happens now with me anyway is that I don't think about how I can do things faster. I think about what I can stop doing entirely. So like Apple got rid of the keyboard and then all of a sudden, revolution in cell phones. And so I think now for myself, and at least what I'm trying to push our reps and actually the entire company on is don't worry about what you could do faster. That's table stakes. What can you completely replace? And start with the question is, like, can AI replace this? Can it help me do it better? And if the answer is yes, it's worth the investment of time.
Such a good analogy there. So Benjamin, one thing I'm curious about for you is that when I speak with a lot of leaders, a challenge that is very present is that I just don't have the time to dive into these tools and utilize them. I know you have used several of them. How do you prioritize your time to experiment, and how much of your role, you mentioned the IC versus being a leader, how much of your role is becoming like the thought leader or the thought creator for new systems inside of Cube?
It's a great question. And this would be a horrible interview answer, but I'm going to give it to you straight about who I am as a person. First of all, like I love working. I'm not a 9 to 5 guy, and it's not because I couldn't be. I think I could be probably pretty successful being a 9 to 5 guy, but like if I'm awake and not spending time with my son, or I'm working, and it's because it's like my hobby. I used to say it in interview questions, and I think people would think I was lying. But like if I am awake, I'm working. And so recently, what I've been doing is spending time in the morning and spending time in the evenings, quite frankly, just like experimenting. I think it's super important though, like, although I don't block off time, I do have some strategy about how I approach this. I'm always starting with a problem, right? Like I'm not sitting in ChatGPT or Claude or any of these tools and just like randomly prompting saying, help me come up with ideas. What I'm doing is looking at every day. So if in the morning I start working on it, I think the day before, what did I do that maybe could have been better? The output could have been more professional. It could have been quicker. And then at the end of days, I'm taking stock the same way and saying like, hey, what did I do today that could be different? And so I think from a prioritization standpoint for anyone listening, this is both for ICs and for executives. I think starting with the problem of what you're trying to solve and where you think you could be better helps you prioritize it. And then to your second point of your question, like this is something that like our founder, Christina, we got in a room probably, I don't know, a couple months ago, and we all just were honest with ourselves and said, hey, we have to start diving into this more. But like I was following her lead. She got like super into this super quick and like was slacking me late nights and texting me in the mornings and like all these different use cases. And it kind of like fired me up. And then we hired a new VP of sales. His name is Steve. I worked with him at my last company, Placer. And actually, Bill, because I don't even know if I told you this, but because of one of your posts that you sent me an email like, hey, you should approach SKO this year differently, and you should be spending some time doing like AI hacking. I shared that with Steve, and Steve did an entire session on building gems for the reps. And that inspired me from there. Like that day after that, I've spent every day learning AI. So I needed to be pushed in the right direction, but I did so by following the footsteps of our new VP and Christina. But today, I think like a large part of my job is thought leadership. It's around championing the execution of how do we make sure that we're taking best use of this, groundbreaking technology. So coming up with the ideas, but then most importantly, making sure they're being executed on.
That's great. I think you really anticipated where I was going to take the next question, which was what was the spark? I mean, I think the problem basis is a really good place because I've talked with a lot of revenue leaders and I hear, well, there's a specific use case that I can visualize doing better. Maybe your keyboard, no keyboard example, Benjamin. Or I've heard about what you just shared with where Steve saw your hand and raised it, right? Like I heard about this from another colleague of mine outside my organization, or sometimes it's even happening organically inside the organization, right? Like we have these folks that are a little bit more AI native, maybe a little bit younger, earlier in their career, and they're out there using this stuff every day for different use cases and then are applying it to business and bringing it up here. So it's really interesting to hear how you think about it from the problem statement, because I think, like I said, one of the challenges I've heard is just finding enough time to do it. And then where do I start?
You know what I'd say too, Bill, and I think this will resonate with anyone that is either held a bag in their career or now is over one. Like prospects typically don't buy until the pain they've experienced is so large that they feel like they need to change. And then when you're selling a B2B product, like you're ideally, connecting your solution to their future state where they think, hey, my life's going to suck a little bit less if I have your product or service. That's become the same thing with AI for me. And I know we'll get into some of the examples, but once I accomplish something with Claude or with ChatGPT, and I'm like, this is a 10 times better way to doing this. It saves me time. It saves me heartache. The output's better. Then it's like a part of my life. Like I can't go back. Like some of the use cases we'll discuss on this podcast, like I can't imagine selling or leading a sales team without them now. And so where I'm going with this is, yeah, it starts with a problem, but once that problem's solved and your future state becomes this value driven thing based upon something you build or something you prompt, like there's no going back from there. So I would encourage everybody, if they're having trouble starting with it, pick a problem. And then once it's solved, you'll be addicted.
So let me ask on that. Is is there an issue with persistence? Do you go solve something and then it stays and persists inside the organization, or do you see evolution of the different experimentation you're doing become more operationalized and it just gets locked in?
This, I think, is the most challenging thing from a leadership perspective, because for me, it's like super easy to be disciplined. Like I have always like prided myself on like, if I know something works, I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to take it, to the next level in terms of productivity. But when it comes to the reps, like, and the people throughout the organization, I do think it's still so new that it isn't something engraved in everyone. Like I can't wave a magic wand and say, hey, tomorrow morning, you guys are all going to start operating differently. So what I've been trying to do is like when I come to these aha moments of things that I'm using in practice, I'll get all the reps on the call or in the Manhattan office here, I'll gather them around a computer and I'll show them the whole workflow and be like, guys, do you understand what this is going to do to your pocket? Like, do you understand how much more money you can make, how much better of experience prospects are going to have? So like the operational part, I'll say, is the challenge, because you could roll out an SOP, you could build a document, like Steve built those gems at a landing page. It doesn't make people use them though. You still have to, it's like almost, it's funny. It's almost like I'm back to selling. I'm just selling, an improved feature state to my actual company now. So it's definitely harder than just the ideation part.
Okay, got it. So I think I've built up enough anticipation here, Benjamin. Let's talk tools and let's talk some use cases, because we've hinted and talked around it, but I know that the audience that's listening is going to be really interested and curious to know what you've actually done. So tell me a little bit about the tools. You talked about ChatGPT is where you started. You've talked about Claude. What are your faves and why right now?
Yeah, I think I got to retell the story. So Bill, you might be bored. Listeners, hopefully they find interest in this.
Let's go.
I got to retell the story of like where you asked me at the beginning what the tipping point was. I think, or jumping off point. I think there's been many, but this was the biggest one. So we had a rather large company that I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's a rather large enterprise organization that we got a lead from, and we're still figuring that out at Cube. And so my whole thing was like, I told Christina, I'll take it. Like I'm going to get back in the seat. Also as CRO, like I try to run at least one deal cycle a quarter if I have time. So this seemed like a great use. And so a lot like anyone that's ever sold to enterprise, you realize that they have these buying centers, they're small teams. And a lot of the times their use cases are not the same as what our product marketing material would suggest on a website. More importantly, not exactly what our enablement material would dictate for follow-up. So I ran this whole sales cycle, called the champion afterwards. I'm like, hey, what do we got to do here? Like, what do you need? Because his next steps were, hey, I got to pitch this internally at this ideas meeting. I said, what do you need? He's like, I need a deck that outlines exactly our use case and how Cube's going to solve it. I'm like, no, done. No problem. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm freaking out because I'm like, I know we do not have any material that's exactly this use case, because it's a kind of sliced a little bit differently. Called my head of product, his name is Cheyenne, brilliant guy. And he's like, yeah, I mean, we don't have anything like that. I probably can help you build it. Talk to the marketing team. Yeah, sure. Once it's all together, I could probably help you build it. Meanwhile, like I need to get back to this guy today. Like I am a huge person on like follow-up should be done. I have an SLA for the team. Like I want it done the same day, if not at the very latest 24 hours. So like I wanted to wow this team, right? I want to sell to this organization. And so it was literally the day after Claude released their new Opus model. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I watched their product marketing on Twitter, which I think is amongst the best in the industry right now, and why I think they're starting to take an edge over OpenAI. And so I watched this prompt of them building a deck, and I'm like, let's give it a shot. And so we have Gong internally, my favorite recording tool. And I went into the 4 calls, downloaded all the transcripts, fed it to Opus, and I gave it a prompt. And I said, hey, I'm selling this enterprise deal. I need to build a deck based upon the use cases uncovered in these calls. They're called out pretty specifically. I need a current state, future state slide. I need to talk about the ROI, time savings, all of this. And by the way, I also needed to be in Cube's branding. So I uploaded, Cube Solutions deck that has all of our
Sure.
value props and our branding. And I put it into Opus. And the output was like insane. Like I had never seen in 12 years of selling software, I had never seen a deck to the quality that this thing was. And so I'm skeptical, of course, and everyone should be AI. Like you should always triple check things. It does make mistakes, it hallucinates. So I sent it to the head of product of our solutions architect on the deal, and they both responded and were like, this is like perfect. Like, and I didn't tell them I used Claude at first. So like, this is amazing. And eventually I told them, of course, I didn't want to take credit for it. But literally the only thing I needed to change was formatting. That's it. And so I sent that deck as is after the formatting. And I called the champion later that night. He's like, I'm looking at it right now, Ben. This is spot on, exactly what I needed. I'm going to look like an all-star internally. And I'm getting the chills thinking about it because all I could think was like, oh my God, sales just changed forever because every seller can have a personalized deck with the output of like, a Gartner level analyst coupled with a designer that worked at, Wix, all of a sudden is going to be in my back pocket. And that was like the first big moment. And I do it now on every deal I'm involved with, and all the sellers do it on every one of theirs.
So let's break this down because, like I said, there's a lot of revenue leaders. There's a lot of just any function leaders out there that have probably not experimented as far as you have. So let me summarize what I think I heard. You watched the Claude Opus product marketing video. You were inspired by it. You went to it, and it sounds like you downloaded 4 Gong calls and upload those there. Then you uploaded, like you said, your value positioning and messaging deck for Cube, and also it's got the look and feel. And it sounds like you wrote some prompts where you said, I need a business case created around some specific type of use case. Is that roughly what you did?
That's exactly it. And I'll caveat too that I have all of my AI tools, whether it's Claude, Gemini, whatever. I also have it I have it ask me 3 clarifying questions before it executes. I think that's a super important thing because otherwise it takes a lot of liberties that you might have to go back and fix. So yes, you spot on, minus the part I left out of like asking the clarifying questions, which they were great questions. So
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of folks that what they'll do is prompt it to ask, maybe not 3, but just ask clarifying questions until you have enough information to give me a really precise, specific answer back for me. So I think you're calling out a best practice here. So for the listeners that haven't heard that, right before you hit the submit button for your prompt, you can add that element in there that, and before you answer, come back and give me 1 or 2 or 3 questions that will help you train the answer to be a little bit better. So you just mentioned a couple of other tools there like Gemini and things like that. Before we jump into more use cases, Benjamin, what other tools have you been playing with?
yeah, I started with OpenAI. I went to Gemini afterwards because we had an enterprise subscription here. Claude has become my go-to large language model for a number of reasons. I also think I like what the company represents externally facing too, but obviously different conversation for a different time. My next one that I am obsessed with is Lovable. First of all, I think from an innovation standpoint, they kind of did it first, like landing pages, decks. Now, Opus does some of that as well today, but I think Lovable still has an edge there. Also, like they're doing really great stuff externally facing. Like I follow their CRO on LinkedIn, and they're not posting about websites, which is what I think the tool started as. Now it's like what tools can be built, what efficiencies can be gained from build, like look internally and see what you can operationalize with AI. So yeah, the large language models, all that for sure. And then definitely Lovable. The other one I'd say I've been spending a lot more time on, and I used to spend time on this back when I was a consultant, but I've just recently got into it with our head of SDR is using Clay. Like I think the AI stuff there is incredible. They have a new agent that helps you build, and I think it has removed the barrier to entry for people that are maybe a little bit less technical. So Lovable, all the large language models in Clay would be my favorites.
It's ironic that you bring up those two companies because those are the next 2 guests on the Sound
Oh, wow.
Bites
No
podcast.
kidding.
CRO of Lovable and CRO of Clay are have raised their hands to do it with me. So I'm looking forward to exploring with them.
Oh,
Um,
great. Wow.
it's like going back to your Lovable comment. It was interesting. I was watching something happen at the tail end of 2025 where I was talking with revenue leaders who were planning their sales kickoff. And you mentioned this, I think the post that I'd sent out about this. And we were having a lot of conversations about like, what are you seeing out there? What are people doing? Because, sales kickoffs, they're really important. They get the team all on the same page. It lets you present the roadmap, the messaging, really what the goals are for the year. But as we know, they can become a little bit rote. And so I had a lot of revenue leaders asking me for what are new ideas you're hearing about. And one I kept hearing about was I'm hearing about people using tools like Lovable to go give an assignment to their ICs and say, build something. Like, I don't even care if it's a business related type of thing. If you want to do something personal, I just want you getting hands on with these tools. And like I said, that was the purpose of today's sound bites, Benjamin, was to not talk about like package software, but was to talk about how we can be actionable as leaders in our organizations. And so I think that's a really cool idea that a bunch of revenue leaders were out assigning to their individual contributors, like, go get hands on, because it's going to advance you as a person, but also professionally in your thinking.
Totally. And I would also tell you too, right? Like, back to your product, or back to your operationalize question earlier. I sit over an org of now 70 people, and I have 6 direct reports. And like, I actually spent time this weekend talking to some of them over the phone. Like, I was walking on my treadmill and talking to them over the phone and challenging them to spend more time. Like, I don't, and I called it out on our ELT Slack channel. I was like, team, I don't know that we are doing a great job. This chat is, I know our executive team is all over this, but I don't believe yet I have done a great job of ensuring our leaders are spending enough time in it. Because like, again, this is, and I don't mean to be dramatic about this, but I truly feel like we are living in a dawn of like a new era, and every week it changes. And I think if we're not constantly spending time in it, they're going to be left behind. And so like, yes, assigning it to the reps is great, but I also say like, even assigning to your frontline leaders is super important as well. Like, things come across my desk now, like, to be checked, whether it's decks, whether it's emails, whatever it is. And I literally, the first question I ask is like, hey, what level of this was done by AI? Because I don't want everything done by AI, but what I do want is them thinking that that's the first place to go to save them time.
It's interesting. I have this, it's kind of a like offhand kind of quiz that when I'm speaking with anybody that's really interested in going further in AI, I'll ask them a few questions. The first one is, well, are you using any of the big LLMs? And then secondly, have you trained one of them to your voice, to your messaging? Are you using voice to communicate, right? Like you talked about the keyboards earlier in today's session. Like, are we eliminating that and just using voice to do it? I will ask questions on, have you downloaded it to your mobile device? Is it in your favorites bar of your mobile device? I mean, it's interesting. I have a 9-year-old son, and I've been watching what he does when he picks up my phone, and he goes over to ChatGPT and asks things. He just skips browsers to go and ask questions there. And then I'll ask some questions like, have you done give me 3 clarifying questions before you give me an answer? Have you done something where you'll say like, take this messaging and rate it on a 1 to 100 scale, and then fix the pieces that didn't get 100 and rewrite it to be 100 out of 100. Like these type of techniques. So like I said, it's my kind of offhand way of just like measuring where someone's at. And I'll tell you what, every time I hear something new from someone like you, it provokes me to ask a new question, because I go and start experimenting and doing something myself. So, listen, I get really, there's just such an exciting time right now. And we could definitely spin off on that. But before that, let's try and stay focused a little bit here. So, so great use case on the business case, the justification case that you built up. What other use cases have you invested in? Like, have you looked at enablement? Have you looked at territory and account research, prospecting? Obviously, we just talked about value prop. You've done that. So what other areas have you explored inside of Cube?
2 comes to mind. So Cube's about to go through a new pricing change. We're releasing some new pricing, moving over to more module as we continue to go up market, and also, focus on NDR and such. And so we're in an ELT meeting, and Christina's in a spreadsheet, right? Like, we're building the tiers, gold, silver, bronze, whatever it is. And while we're all discussing it, I'm like, man, I really want to visualize this. And so I download the Excel file, I drop it into Claude, I prompt it and say, hey, Cube's about to release new pricing, send me a pricing page of what it could look like, with our branding, of course. And by the way, side note, and I think this is probably a trivial piece of advice, but if people are new, they might not know this. If you build a project or folders in ChatGPT or Claude and you drop your branding in once, you don't have to keep telling it like, hey, make sure the branding's coming. Right. And so I dropped this pricing page, or dropped this Excel sheet, and it built out a fully interactive dynamic pricing page that you could select the number of employees. It would change the amounts. And it was like so good that we literally just shipped it over to our web designer and said, hey, like, just put this on the back burner. We're finalizing the numbers, but let's go build it. And again, like, I would think that, I know this from being in MarTech, like somebody would have charged $5,000, $10,000 for something like this. And
Right.
it's not so much that we're saving the money. It's more that we're saving the time. That's the more important thing. Like, could the business afford to pay a designer $5,000? Sure. Is it great that we saved the 5,000? Yeah. But the fact that like business operators like myself and our VP of ops or our head of product that are not design people could go and ship something like this, like the efficiencies gained internally are crazy. So that was one that I wanted to highlight.
Before you go to the other one, so we've done the business case, we've done pricing. I know you said you had another one, but I think you just really put an exclamation mark on a topic I introduced earlier, which is how are you measuring this? And I know we'll talk about this in a few minutes too, but you just talked about time and money. You're right. Like it was $5,000, $10,000. Like it was great for you to be able to save that. But just think about the time it takes for you to ship the ideas of what you have, that spreadsheet, communicate kind of these are some of our thoughts of how we think it should look and feel, and maybe sign a contract with the designer that does it. That person has to go back and like go put that into whatever set of tools they use, come back and give you what their output is. And then you have the back and forth that goes there. And think about what happened is in real time, in a meeting, Benjamin, you took the spreadsheet, you downloaded it, you shared it. Everybody said, hey, maybe change this or that. But like it was 99% done. And you shipped it over to your designer right away and said, like, look, now go create this in a way that can go up on our website. That time savings right there, that's a productivity enhancer.
Yeah, it actually sounds even more arduous than I thought it was for your explanation. Like, yeah, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of time for sure. I mean, I think I simplified it, but as you were explaining that, I like refelt the pain of what it's like to even launch a new website, which I've been a part of like many, many times. So
Right, right. Pixels.
that's
You're
interesting.
looking at a lot of pixels. All right. The other use case, what was the other one that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, this last one I think is pretty large. So I hope that I'm not offending any of Battery's portfolio companies or anyone out there that's listening. But I have oftentimes felt like enablement softwares by and large have never really been like exactly a home run when it comes to content management for sellers. And the reason I say that is because I've used them all and I'm not going to call them out, but like, and they've gotten like 80% there, but like we still always found ourselves in Google Docs. We still always found ourselves in spreadsheets and PowerPoint. And so it never felt like it was all encompassing. So much so that at Placer, the last company I was at, our VP of enablement, his name is Jay. We actually built like an intranet and it was like our own custom developed slash designed internal enablement portal because it fit our sellers. Like we knew it fit our sellers. And so once I started experimenting with all this stuff, enablement's a challenge at Cube. And it's a challenge at every company because products change at least once a month, especially nowadays, maybe like once a week. And so you're constantly having to update things. You're constantly having to change the positioning. And so what I did was I took 7 of our most consumed internal content pieces. So like commonly asked questions, positioning statements, persona guides, all this stuff, dropped it into Claude. And I said, hey, I want to build an interactive enablement portal. But what I want to do is not only do I want to make sure content is super accessible, I want a learning element to it. So that we can actually make sure that reps are maintaining or retaining some of the information they got. And it spit out this like incredible custom Cube branding. I think I sent you a screenshot, but I'm still amazed even talking about it out loud. But it's like this incredible thing that the reps can go to. And it's like, hey, like select your journey. Like, who are you talking to? Talking to a VP of finance? What kind of company? Great. Based upon those 2 inputs, it's then presenting content, positioning themes, common objections, discovery questions I need to ask. And this thing, like, it lives internally at Cube now, and I can update it with a click of a mouse. Like, we're shipping a huge release this month on our MCP server. And so that wasn't in any of our content. And so now it's like, if I'm in Seismic or any of the other softwares, I'm going in, creating a new page, whatever. Now I'm just going back and saying, hey, this page, I need you to add the MCP server. And by the way, I don't even need to tell it where. I say, you drop it in where you think it's relevant, and it's getting it right because it's getting the context over time and how much I use it. So yeah, this enablement thing has been a huge win. Thursday, I came into the office and there were 2 guys here early and I walked to my desk and they were both on it. And I was like, man, this is crazy because it's not just that I know it's valuable, they know it's valuable.
So, okay, you said a couple things that I think are really good things to double click into. First of all, the one about utilization. That's the first time that we've talked about that you're not using something, right? Like you built the business case, you did the pricing page, and obviously the pricing page will get seen by your buyers. But now you're talking about an app that's being used internally by your sales rep. So that's kind of like, a bell going off right there. Like that's where I'm talking about. We've moved beyond experimentation to operationalizing. The other thing that jumps out at me that you said is the fact that you can update it so quickly. And it begs a question for me. I'm curious, have you taken that enablement tool and uploaded like customer case studies yet so that as the reps are doing this interactive type of role play with it, that they can have customer case studies to share and like ROI and impact statements to be able to give to prospective buyers?
Yep. And I won't take credit for what the output was, but yes, I did. And what Claude did when building the enablement through my prompts. And by the way, I will say the enablement tool, it wasn't as quick as the deck or the pricing page. It took a couple prompts to get it to where I wanted to be, especially because I wanted an interactive element. But what it did was it ingested the case studies. And like I would love for every rep, if I called a random rep, right, I'd love to be like, tell me about the Covis case study. I'd love them to be able to rattle it off. But realistically, they just need a couple sentences that drives home some form of ROI. And so Claude extracted from the case studies, and there's little, tidbits that come up and say like, hey, you're talking to this person. Here's 2 sentences about one of your customers. And so it actually intuitively understood like, hey, maybe it did, or maybe it didn't. I don't know. But intuitively says, hey, your sellers are going to need some quick facts about your customers. Here's 2 sentences to make it actionable. So yeah, absolutely.
That's great. That's great. All right, a couple more questions to bring us home here. So first things first, are there any ideas in your head, Ben, that you visualize right now, but you haven't executed on? What's the next best use case that you're thinking about?
So my mind is actually going to account management now. So we have a little bit over 500 customers. And of course, FP&A use cases are what they are, but they all have different needs. They all have different gaps in terms of how they're using the product. And one of the things we're obsessed with at Cube is like, how do we make sure that we're really dialing in on our customers using every element of the product that we know is going to improve their lives? And so we become obsessive about understanding value through a product usage standpoint. And I had this thought the other day of like, we have so much data in Churn Zero and Salesforce, so much information on our customers, so much context, but it's a lot of uploading. That's why I haven't pulled the trigger on this yet. What I would love to do, Bill, is I would like to get to a state where I get a customized landing page for every customer that we can send out and be like, hey, click here to see your Cube journey so far. It says like, hey, this is what you've accomplished. Here's how many reports you pulled. But by the way, here's the areas you're not using today, and let me help you use them. So like complete with like videos. So it's almost like this customer
Right.
enablement portal. But the difference of using something maybe like I'm even forgetting some of the names right now, but some of the companies that have been in the CS like space for a while, like I think having it uniquely customized with their branding, with their use cases, with the call outs of what they're doing in the software would be a crazy win from a usage and customer success perspective. So I haven't gotten there yet because it's a lot of data, but that's my next like kind of big idea.
I love that idea. I think of it as a maturity model for my customer of where you are in the journey with using our software. And I can remember in my history, we've done that. And obviously it was a lot more manual work than that it seems like it would be using an AI tool and just ingesting data. But what we would try and go and show is for a cohort of people that signed on to using our software around the same time as you, where are you on that journey? Are you farther ahead of them? Are you a little bit behind them? And be able to prompt them to do exactly what you just said, which is let us help educate you on other areas we think you could derive value from our product. So I'll be really interested to hear that use case come to life. So
Oh, now
thanks
that
for
I said
sharing
it
that.
out loud on a podcast, that means I got to do it. So
Yeah, I know
yeah,
that's how that goes. You've committed it here. So
yep.
all right, um, Ben, we've talked about this a little bit, but we haven't dove into it. Let's talk about measurement here. How is the impact of these tools being felt inside Cube? You talked about the two reps that were using it, but as you look out the windshield, well, actually, let me go back. So you said something I thought that was really valuable for all the listeners here is you start with a problem. You tend to start with a problem before you go dive into something like, how could I do something better today or tomorrow that took more work yesterday? So as you think about that, do you apply what you're trying to achieve out the other side from a measurement perspective? Meaning, is it productivity? Is it that I don't need to go hire this role? Is it my ratios for people that support my sellers can expand and get wider? Because I'll tell you, Benjamin, I talk with so many CROs, and so far they are all optimistic about some of those things, but it's been hard to be able to measure. So I'm just curious to get into your thinking about this.
Yeah, I do think we've crossed kind of the chasm because, by the way, it's really funny. I went to one of your battery dinners where the topic was AI, and I remember being around that room. Even then, the use cases were so like trivial compared to what the world is today, right? Like I remember hearing everyone talking, and that was the sentiment with everyone. Hey, we know it, we know it's working, we feel like it's working, but do we know for sure, like money wise, not yet. I do think that we crossed that at Cube at least, and I'll give you the two concrete examples. Number one, like that example that I talked about, the deck and the pricing page, we did, this is a true story. We had a graphic designer on our website, an instructional designer specifically that we were going to have build training content, build decks, build shore up our product marketing material. And that very day, we took it off the website. It is now a responsibility of people like myself and other leaders in the organization that if you have a need like this, or it's presented in one of our strategy meetings, you go and try that first. And honestly, Bill, like I feel bad. It's like almost like I feel guilty saying this out loud because I do know that it replaces someone's job, but it has, right? And so there is real ROI at Cube already, just from a standpoint of saving a headcount. The other thing is on the decks that I was speaking about that I built for that enterprise prospect, the AEs are now all using it, right? And so we used to, I never measured the time, and like it was always something I wanted to do when I got here. I'd love to understand like how long are reps spending on building follow up. Now they might spend similar time, like it maybe let's say it took every good rep 20 minutes to build a good follow up. It might still take 20 minutes because of the prompting and such, but the output is so much higher quality wise. And so while it's early innings, they're being received so well because they're not just using it for follow up decks. Then when they're getting on pricing calls with economic buyers, they're able to present and say, hey, here's everything we heard so far. Here's the challenges. Here's what Cube's going to fix. It's a better sales cycle. We're connecting with buyers better. So like we're doing quite well revenue wise and quota attainment at Cube. And I think like month over month, we're going to continue to see an uptick. Again, competitors will listen to this and maybe they'll start copying it, but at some point everyone's going to get there. So yeah, headcount for sure. And then just saving reps time. But I think less about the time, more about the quality of the output.
Got it. So I heard a couple of things there. I heard certainly it sounds like you had a role you were going to hire for that you guys eliminated. And so that's a hard dollar savings inside of the business. And I certainly understand like the trepidation there that like, maybe I feel a little bit bad. My personal feeling is we cannot stick our heads in the sand around that topic. We have to talk about the labor displacement, but we also have to see that like, this is probably creating new things. So there is some balance, but I think it's real. I think that you're going to find certain roles that you probably don't need inside of the organization because you have these tools available to you to be able to utilize that you are putting to good work. So I think that's clearly an impact statement. The second one you just talked about there, which is you talked about quota, you talked about productivity. It sounds like close rate is good. And for me, what I really think about coming from a selling background is how much time do my sellers spend in front of a buyer, and can I increase that? Like through tools like this, the stat that I've seen commonly cited in the market is that between 20 and 30% of a seller's time is in front of their buyer. And the other 70 or 80% is doing admin work, doing forecast meetings, doing training, doing forecast calls, doing prospecting, all of those things. And can AI help us in that admin side and reduce that, which frees up more time to be in front of buyers, or the time that I am in front of the buyer, make me sharper and crisper, which helps me drive a higher close rate. So to me, the measurements that I'm really optimistic through 2026 to pay attention to are, number one, the amount of time that buyers are in front of their seller, or the amount of time that sellers are in front of their buyers, and then the close rate that goes with that. Are they being more productive at the end of the year than they were previously? And then secondly, the thing that I'm really, really interested in being able to measure is, actually, I kind of mix those two together there. The time in front of the buyers should be measured by the output of what the sellers actually achieve. So you can use quota. I think quota is just a proxy for a number, but realistically, the productivity that you deliver year over year is the one that I want to pay attention to.
I think too, right? Like when I look at the account executives and I see, like I talked about the output and about quality and how important that is. I totally 1000% agree with you about, because just from being an account executive myself, and this is what I told you when we had coffee that day, like you're now an account executive, but you're also a enterprise head of content marketing. You're an enterprise product marketer. You're an enterprise designer. Like all these things are saving reps time so that, to your point, they can spend more quality time with their prospects, and the time that they spend is more valuable now. Like nothing drives me crazier. And this is one of the first things that at least when I got to Cube, and now I'm having, Steve is very big on this too. It's like, you cannot show up to a call by not having some level of deposit. Like salespeople make a ton of withdrawals all day. They ask for a ton of stuff, and a lot of times they get nothing back because it's not meaningful, because prospects don't care. But what I think AI is doing is now enabling you to have more meaningful conversations. So while yes, I think the timing is important, but I think it's the time you're actually spending is becoming, at least for Cube, more meaningful as a result of the quality of our output.
I couldn't agree more. Great call out on the measurement side. All right, last item here, Benjamin. There's somebody listening to this and they are inspired by the use cases you've talked about, by the usage of tools that you're doing, and they're motivated to go do something. If that person's at like ground zero or their early stage of using AI tools, what advice would you share on how they can get themselves going?
First of all, I hope my mother listens to this. I'm inspiring people. I think that's a big win for you, Mom. Um, so I have a couple different things about this. So the first thing is that I would, if I'm a leader, I immediately leave this podcast or leave this recording, and I become obsessed with what I said at the beginning, and that's like looking at your day every day to seeing like where you're spending a lot of time. It's not everything, right? Like I'm not in the camp of thinking AI is going to replace every single thing we do, but I am surprised more often than not at the things that I know that it can completely replace. So look at your days, look at the time where you're spending time, and figure out like, is this replaceable by AI, or can I at least get 90% there? That's number one. Number two, I think as a leader, it's our responsibility to the company and to the world of business to business or business to consumer software to making sure our people are also taking this approach too. They should not be spending their time doing manual work. It's not 2020 anymore. There's so many efficiencies to be gained and the quality can go much higher. I would take it a step further. We've recently, and I did steal this idea. One of the staffing firms, this guy Max that we use, he came to me and was like, "Hey, we're doing this for clients. We're starting to test for AI literacy." And so actually we've started to interview, like before they even get to us, there's screening questions about how they're using AI today. Because you almost want to inherit people or hire people that are on the cutting edge or at least spending the time there. Now, the people you have today, like they're great people. We're not going to fire people because they're not that's our job to drive that. But I think from a hiring lens, that's something that we haven't talked about on this podcast. Like, I think that's super important. Like everyone that comes in now, and I'm giving away a bit of a trade secret, not really, but when we hire people, a part of their projects now are building something. Build something that you've learned in the interview process that Qt can improve and then present it. We just hired our first go-to-market engineer, and that was a big part of his assignment. So anyway, yeah, I think it's examine your day, be obsessed with the people that you have today to make sure you're championing the execution of AI usage, and then also just be careful when you're hiring and try to hire those cutting edge people.
I like great closing thoughts, Benjamin. I think that championing the innovation inside is so critical for us as leaders to be doing today. And then for the next generation, I'm fortunate I get to speak with a lot of students and talk to them about what I'm seeing out there in the market. And I encourage the same thing, which is I do my little AI literacy test, great term that you got from Max there, that I test them on. And I was surprised that a lot of the students I'm talking with aren't further along in it. And I think it's so critical because what you talked about a few minutes ago with this role as an AE, you're not just an AE anymore. You're an enterprise content creator. You're going to have to do more things, which means we're not going to get rid of all of those roles. Those roles aren't going to just get eliminated by AI, but you're going to have to up level your game and have to have more skill sets to be able to do that. And so diving in early to the technology, I think is super critical. So, Benjamin, this has been a great session. Thanks so much for sharing. Like I said, I really wanted to focus on what I'd call hands-on AI, not packaged software, but really the hands-on type of things that revenue leaders like yourself can be doing. So I think you mission accomplished on making Mom proud, on inspiring people today.
Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you. And for everyone listening, like back to my workaholic kind of attitude, like shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I'm happy to get on calls, happy to share ideas. I've been doing that a lot lately. And I think I've been pretty selfish with my time in my career because I'm always so focused on what's at my fingertips and accomplishing the goals of the companies I have. But I've been getting a lot of value just having conversations with other leaders. So if you want to bounce some ideas off me, my DMs are open. I'm looking forward to meeting some new people.
It's how we learn. So great call to action there, Ben, like a true sales professional. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Phil.